we're really going to focus today on why we have our microchip rule. We're going to talk about the microchip itself, and then what do you need to read those microchips, and looking at the different technologies that are out there. So ISO-compliant microchips are really looking at the 15-digit number. The Avid chips, the older chips that were on the market years and years ago, have a letter in them. So what we're looking at now is the current microchips that were on the market that we're putting in our horses, so you know that it is a valid ISO-compliant chip. It is a 15-digit number, no letters at all. The ISO-compliant means it meets the International Standards Organization for compliance. And that compliance means that they meet the standard for readability, so they can be read now by that universal reader. Yes, historically, there were different frequencies, but now we are consistently using these ISO-compliance chips that are used by the readers that are out there on the market. The other thing is, I hear about, they think there's some drone or something that's going to pick up these microchips. Does not work like that, folks. Does not work. It is a passive chip. You have to activate it with the reader. So no, I am not scanning people, and no, I don't have horses that I can scan with a drone. It actually has to be scanned with a reader. It is a passive chip. There are some chips that have added qualities and characteristics, meaning they have the ability to be temperature sensing. There is a microchip on the market that actually is temperature sensing. It's a biothermal chip, and built into the microchip itself is a temperature sensing component. And it can be read with a specific reader that will receive that signal and receive that temperature of that horse. Again, when we're looking at from a biosecurity standpoint, I would strongly recommend those biothermal chips, because it's much easier to take the scan of a horse and get a temperature than get a rectal temperature. It's easier, safer, and quicker. And again, in a disease outbreak situation, I would love the ability to go down a barn and take temperatures. Not that people lie or anything on their temperature charts or their temperature logs. No, that would never happen. But for the purpose of health and for the purposes of a quick assessment in an urgent situation where a temperature is going to be your first indicator of potential infectious disease, that's a good sign if there's an outbreak to pull that horse out. The quicker you pull it out, the quicker it's going to stop exposing other horses. And in some disease situations, the temperature rises before a horse sheds any bacteria or virus. So getting it out will protect that population. So that is another reason why we do have that mandatory fever reporting rule that went into place this year. And this rule says if there's an unexplained temperature over 101.5, which is our fever cutoff, it has to be reported to the veterinarian and competition management. And the purpose of that, again, is that early identification to stop an outbreak in its tracks, and so that we can continue and support horse shows. We have successfully done this in the 2 years I've been here. We have successfully gone on with shows that have herpes on the ground as well as shows that have had strangles. And it's because we catch those horses early. And so that's really why I strongly urge the biothermal microchip. So there are different chips out there, and we're going to look at those. What's on the market right now in the United States is your Life chip, your Biotherm chip. We have a Destron flaring chip. We have a Dytamars chips. The thing to consider is they're all in the United States. They're all going to be consistently a 1/2 inch microchip. The one thing to consider that we're learning is over in Europe, specifically Germany, we are seeing microchips. And they're 1/4 inch versus a 1/2 inch. And when we come to talking about scanning them and reading those microchip numbers, that's where we're going to have some challenges. So when we're talking in the United States, they're all going to be the 1/2 inch microchip that we're seeing. And they're in I brought one for demonstration. So this is the needle that you're going to see, and in this needle, in this little syringe, you will see the microchip is in there. And it's a 14 to 16 gauge needle. So some veterinarians do a local for the area, some do not. It's up to the veterinarian and up to the horse owner on what that horse may be comfortable with. But the key here, and we're going to talk about this, is the placement. So we need, number one, to remember to scan the horse before you put in another microchip. Because some of these horses have a chip. And sometimes you can't find them, and we'll talk about that because that's a critical point. Don't just scan one side of the horse, and I'll show you that in a minute. But all of the microchips that come in these packages have the actual chip number on the back on these stickers and should always be read before you implant it in the horse to make sure it matches. So when implanting, I have a nice little picture with that taped off area. That is where the microchip should be, in the left nuchal ligament, a third of the way down on the neck. So those black X's that you see are where it should not be. It should not be. Now, when this is implanted properly, this does not migrate. There's published studies on there. So why are we seeing them in these X spots? If they do not go directly into the skin, to the hub, they're not getting implanted deep enough in the nuchal ligament. The microchip itself has a polymer coating that will cause a reaction if it's in the nuchal ligament, and it will secure it there. But if we're seeing them go in at an angle, they're going to go in more subcutaneously, and they're going to move. So a properly implanted microchip. Now, some of the concerns is in a younger horse, they are likely to be not getting it in that small nuchal ligament. So as the horse gets older, that chip has moved because it's not embedded in the proper place in the nuchal ligament. So I just want to show you that that is where you should be looking for it. But because we have learned through some of our studies, that's not where we're finding them. So when you think about where they're being placed, that is where they should be placed. But because they're not getting them in that nuchal ligament and they're moving in that subcutaneous, you may find them as far up as the pole, and you may find it as low as the chest area or the shoulder area. So when you're scanning a horse, make sure you scan the entire side of that horse. I actually tell you to go on the other side because if it's an angle in a young horse, we are seeing some being picked up based on the angle that they implanted it on the other side based on the direction of the reader. So again, do not microchip unless you have gone completely left side, right side, pole to shoulder. Some factors when we talk about, so that's the microchip, 15 digits, that's how you know it's an ISO-compliant chip. Several chips out there, biothermal chip has a temperature sensing capacity. Now when we talk about readers, there are various readers available, anything from a handhelds, and they all have different capabilities. They all have different read ranges. They all have different ability to scan a horse, meaning they're built for read range, but they're all built for the same frequency. They're all built to detect those ISO-compliant microchips. So what are you going to consider to determine which reader you want? A lot of people just tell me it's the price. Well, if you go with the cheapest, understand their penetration level may not be as strong. So those chips that are harder to read are not going to be readable. So what is your purpose? If your purpose is to have 100% read, you are going to need a more efficient and higher readability in that microchip reader. So that's number one. If you're scanning and you can confirm identity another way, whether it's a Coggins or something else, then, and you don't need 100%, you may go with the cheaper one. Or at shows, I have some show managers that buy one expensive one that's going to catch those ones that the other one won't catch, like the Germany chips. and then they have a lot of the little ones, because they'll pick up the majority. So that's what you need to think about. Are you going to have one microchip reader or multiple microchip readers? What type of microchips are you likely to see? So again, if you have a lot of international horses, we are now seeing those Germany microchips, which are also used in Netherlands. We're seeing a couple of those. Those are the mini chips, so they're harder to read. So again, that's going to impact your readability. And then again, if you want a biothermal reading on a temperature, you're going to need that biothermal chip reader. And right now, there's only one of those on the market, and we're looking at a cost of $350 to $450 in that range to get that ability. But that also is one of the readers that has the best read range, and we'll talk about that. When we talk about read range, we're talking about how close do you have to be? What is that distance? And then durability. None of these should be dropped on the floor. I've learned that the hard way. None of these should be kicked by a horse. They do not last. They should not fall out of your pocket. Some of them do come with protective cases that are a little more sturdy. So think about that as how fractious are these horses that you're reading? Is it likely going to kick it out of your hand? So think about that. Some of them also do not like cold weather. So some of them do not, ironically, aren't working right now in some of the climate we had in the last 2 days. So we did put a chart together, and these are the ones that are here. So the one up in the top right-hand corner is the Home Again. And again, that has got the good range depending on the microchip. And you can see it goes from 3.9 inches to 5.7 inches to 8.5 inches to now we go down to 5 again, 3 inches. So you got to look at these are the read range that they are claiming on their product, how far you have to be away from that microchip. And unfortunately, as I said before, this microchip is passive. So it is needing that reader to send that signal and send it back to the chip to send it back to get that number. So when you look at what are the costs of the readers, it all comes down to the performance of those readers as well. So the distance that they can read it and the efficiency of those. So the more expensive, the Merck GPR is the one that will take the temperature. And again, if you're looking at that, we're looking at it could be up to $480. And I picked the high end so we knew what was out there on the market. But you can get $30 microchip readers. And they do work the majority of the time. But again, on some of these horses, they may not pick it up. So you have to determine what is your purpose for buying these readers. We did a pilot project. Well, I'm not going to say we. I'm going to say Mackenzie Hissel, who's my assistant, went out and went to Pennsylvania and to the national show at the horse park and scanned 469 horses. And these were hunter horses and equitation. And the reason I say what discipline it is, because there is word out there that jumpers have a better read rate in their ability to find the chip and read those chips. So what we did is we scanned them with some type of reader. It wasn't standard. We just wanted to see what we could read, where they were read at. So we were looking at location and what reader we could potentially pick them up. And again, it wasn't a structured study. It was just for us to see. So we defaulted to the GPR Home Again reader, which was this one. It has the better read range. We also used the smaller Data Mars Halo readers, but we did find the Home Again was easier. And again, we didn't want to interfere with moving these horses that had to check in. So we didn't want to interfere and take too much time. So we used the GPR Home Again because it was the quickest one. And just so you know, 300 of those 460 horses, or 64%, had it in the right place. We had 83 that were high up by the pole, which was about 17.7%. We had 66 of them that were low. We had 10 that we couldn't find at all. We had 5 horses that had 2 chips, and we had 5 horses that we found only on the right side. So when I tell you to scan everywhere, this is legit. This is legit. I'm not lying. This is what we found in just random scanning of these horses. It wasn't a controlled study because there is no published study out there on what microchip readers in horses have the best read rates. So this was just our pilot project to say, hey, where are these chips? Because we're hearing that people aren't finding them. Well, that's because we're finding 17% that are up by the ear, and we're finding 14% somewhere down lower. So again, this is where it's supposed to be, but it's not always there. So that's why I tell you, scan everywhere. We did have some difficulty scanning these horses, and difficulty means we had to run it a couple times to find these horses. So about 20%. So when people complain about the readers not working, well, it's true because we have different chips we can't find, we have them in the wrong place. Those all cause difficulty. They take more time to read. So again, this is just preliminary data to present to you because we have a lot of questions that folks are asking us about what microchips and what readers. And just so you can understand what countries, we had a bunch of different countries. 162 of those horses had Germany microchips. And so of the 469 horses, 330 had country codes outside of the United States, which means they were microchipped outside the United States. So when it says Germany, Germany has a country code in the first 3 digits of that microchip that traces to Germany that can only be implanted and sold in Germany. So again, when we're looking at this population of horses, this impacts what we scan and what we can read for microchips. Just giving you that preliminary information of why we can't read some of these or why we have some challenges, because both Germany and Netherlands have the mini microchips. So again, preliminary findings, because there's no current publication, and we are looking now to what are the reader costs versus performance needs. They really have to be better evaluated because this was just a pilot study. Observationally, we can definitely say we have readability issues, and we have that the GPR Plus is picking up more of those more challenging ones to find, or the Home Again, which is the same company. A percentage of those microchips, a significant percentage if you ask me, are located outside of where we expect them to be, where we tell people to implant them. And we do have a video on the USEF's website for where to implant that microchip. So we have been trying to share that with the veterinary community and horse owners. And again, some of those foreign chips are those mini microchips. So again, I want to call your attention to the microchip webpage that we have. We have that video. We have a frequently asked questions, a microchip 101 document, and a microchip mythbuster document. All of these are available resources. We've sent them out to the affiliates as a package. We do have posters and infographics as well on microchipping and the benefits of microchipping. Any of those resources are accessible on that webpage in their below publications. If you have any questions, I would say contact Mackenzie because she's done the study in the field, but we're happy to answer any of those questions. But this is just preliminary information so you know what microchips and what readers are what we're seeing works in the horse industry right now. So with that, I think I stayed on time. Any questions? Yeah. The question was, is it easy to remove the microchip and replace it? No. It would actually have to be surgically removed, and it would leave a surgery scar because you'd have to actually x-ray to see where it was because there's no mark once you put it in. Yeah. So it's not the microchip that they're having the allergy to. It's the actual needle that it's in. And we are working with the manufacturer because at this time there is not an allergen-free microchip needle. Yes? Yeah, it can be done because they do it in thoroughbreds and standardbred racehorses already, and the standardbreds use the biothermal chip, and they are successfully placing it. You just have to know where it is and make sure you can actually feel it when you implant it. The thoroughbreds and standardbreds that are doing them at a young age find that they can find it. Yeah. Well, they're doing them in as young as 1 month of age. Yeah, 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 yep. Some of those racehorses, they're doing them at 1 month of age. Yep.
You mentioned cold weather. Is that cold? They're not working inside the horse with the cold weather?
No, it's actually the readers aren't working. The readers have a temperature sensitivity is what we're finding. Yep. But they do, the Merck one did build a sleeve for it that does seem to work better in the winter months. Yes.
You mentioned that it's harder to read the chips in the 100 lactating horses versus jumpers.
Yeah, that's anecdotal. We have not actually gone into the jumpers. It's coming from the folks at the FEI that are reading those more frequently, and they seem to be seeing less of the unreadables. We have not done that study. It's just from the FEI data.
This might be a dumb question, but
There's no dumb question.
yeah, is it the same kind of thing you put in a dog?
Yeah, it is the microchips are similar. The needles are going to be different, and that's really where it comes down to. Some of the problems that I think we're having is the chip is the right chip, but the needle that they're using, if it's a dog needle, it's smaller. I mean, it's not getting in deep enough. So it's not going into that Nico ligament.
So the reader would read a dog one as well?
Yep, yep. I've tested it on my cat. She's microchipped. He's microchipped. I have not tested it on humans. Humans are not microchipped, and I am not microchipping people. Don't put that out there. Yes, ma'am.
So if there is an allergic reaction to the insertion of the chip, what would that look like? And if somebody knows that they have a reaction?
There's been no documented cases. This is what the issue is there's been no documented cases. So when I talk to the manufacturers, that's been the issue is there's no documented cases to even know what that would look like. But people are using the injection needles reaction to what could potentially be a microchip needle reaction. We have no evidence of it at this point. And I've talked to all of the microchip companies of whether that is available, and there's nothing out there right now. And they have not documented any of those. So, again, it's a concern that's been voiced, and again, there's no evidence of it. So we're going with there's been no evidence of. To the needle, correct, not the chip. Somebody over here, yep.
What is the accuracy rate of the biothermal microchips?
Yeah, for temperature.
Do you see that as a liability in a sense? If someone's just going by the microchip?
So, again, the biothermal microchip should always be used as a temperature trend monitoring. If you get an accelerated or a higher temperature, you should always go with a rectal temperature to follow up with it. Again, it's for screening purposes only, but it is, over time, they've gone and improved them since 2006 to 0.05. Yeah. I think we're going to have to, I'm happy to answer more questions. I'm going to be here forever. Steven says keep going because he doesn't want to talk, but I'm going to make him talk. So I am around, so if you have additional questions, please feel free to come up and chat. Thanks, guys.